Okay, so I got a Husqvarna here yesterday. Now I'm going to be honest with you before I get started. I've already diagnosed this mower. It didn't take long for me to figure out what was wrong with it. But they brought it over and said the starter was smoking and it wouldn't start. And she wanted me to check it out, get the starter working, and then check out the rest of the mower. And then she handed me a battery. So I got to put the battery in the battery well, and I thought, where is the red wire? There should be a red wire along with the black one. So I had to trace it out. Found the starting solenoid right here. So the red wire should be coming from here to the battery, but it's not. It's missing. So someone has removed it along with the nut that holds it on. So I couldn't even use the battery to try to see if the starter was going to work. So I hooked the lawnmower up to the truck battery using a jumper cable. So what I did was I put the negative part of the jumper cable right here, and then I took the positive, you know, it was on the truck of course, and then I took the positive cable, the red cable, stuck it here. Nothing happened, absolutely nothing. So the starter was completely burned out. Well, I told her, I said I might have a starter here that I might be able to swap out. I'll have to take a look. I'll let you know this evening. So I came over to this junk lawnmower that we got. We're using it for parts. And I took a look at this starter, and it's different. So I immediately started researching how much it was going to cost to buy a starter. And I gave her a price, and she said, yeah, go for it. I thought, you know, before I order it, I need to find out what caused the starter to go out in the first place. Now, starters can just go out, that can happen, but it could also be a compression issue. It means that the engine is holding so much compression, it's not releasing compression, that the starter just can't turn it over. So with it smoking, it kind of indicated to me that they were trying to get it to start and it wouldn't start, so they just kept going and kept going and kept going until the starter burned out. So the first thing I did was I turned it by hand just to see how bad it was, how bad the compression was. And that's not hard to do, you just turn it this way. And this has probably got the worst compression I've ever seen. I can't turn it without it. So that tells me one of two things. That either the valve lash is not adjusted correctly, or the decompression release mechanism on the camshaft inside the engine is broken. Now, I have seen an engine not start like this. As a matter of fact, it was that old Craftsman that I just rebuilt, that the valve lash was so far off that it caused it not to release its compression. So the way you start out and find out is you start by taking the hood off. And you got to be careful, there is a wire here for your headlights. So I've already disconnected it. I didn't want to deal with that while I had a microphone attached to me. So this is the overhead valve cover. So we're going to remove that. But the first thing we want to do is take off the spark plug. So we're going to remove the spark plug wire. And the reason we're taking off the spark plug is so I can turn it by hand easier, because without a spark plug you can't build compression. Now, there is no seal on this. I broke it yesterday. I didn't replace it. So these are the tappets. These are the valves. This is the intake, and this is the exhaust. And so what you do is you turn it until one of them is all the way in. So we can see that one coming out. That one, now the intake, the bottom one, is starting to go in. And you take a feeler gauge, 4/1000 feeler gauge, which I don't have with me, I don't need it, and you check the gap in between the tappet here and the lifter. And it was just a little bit off. It wasn't the worst I've seen. It was just a little bit, so I went ahead and adjusted it. And then you come back up with the intake, let this one go all the way in, and then you check this one. Now if you need to adjust it, it takes a little torque screw. You unloosen the torque screw, or you loosen the torque screw I should say, and then you can adjust the gap by turning the nut here, and then you retighten it. Well, it was still tight. I couldn't turn it by hand once I put the spark plug back in. So that tells me that there's a more serious, I don't have a camshaft to show you, but what it is, it's a gear attached to a rod. So imagine that. The camshaft, the rod, has little lobes on it that lift the lifters here. So you have a rod and it has a little lobe here on both sides, one here, and the top one runs the exhaust, the bottom one. So every time that lobe comes around, it lifts this up. Well, on the compression, on the intake side, the bottom one, there is a little hook device. I always call it a mechanism. And that mechanism is on a spring. So as you're trying to start it, that hook grabs the lifter just a little bit and bumps it. And I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here in a minute. After the engine starts, that hook gets out of the way on that spring. It's inertia pressure, throws it out of the way, so you don't have that compression release. Because you want the compression once the engine started, but you don't want the compression trying to start it. So what it is what happens is, as you're turning, the intake comes all the way out. That means it's closed. When it goes in, it means it's open. Well, right now it's out. So the exhaust, the top one, is open. That means the exhaust can come out of the exhaust pipe. And then it continues to rotate, and it comes out, and then the intake starts to open, and it's drawing in air at this point. So now as it comes back around, it starts to close. So now you have compression inside the cylinder. Right now there's compression. In order to release that compression, as it closes like this should do just a slight little bump, just a boop, to release that compression. And so what it does is it releases the compression from about 150 psi down to 50. Something the starter can handle. It doesn't release all the compression, just a little bump. Well, here there's no bump. You can't, as I rotate it, you can't see the bump. And I'm continuing to rotate. There's been no bump. Now the exhaust is starting to open. It comes back. The intake comes in. It starts to open. It comes back out to shut. And no bump. There's nothing. Nothing pushes it back in, just a little bit. Maybe a 1/4 inch. So that means that decompression relief mechanism is broke. This is a very common problem on this intake engine. And there are some theories as to why it happens. No one really has come out and said, okay, this is for sure. But one of the few things that you can definitely help isolate it is oil. As oil gets dirty, it starts to wear out those lobes. Now, I don't understand why wearing out the lobes that lift the lifters here has anything to do with the decompression relief mechanism. But that's what they say. The other issue is maintenance. They say that if your air filter is clogged, it can cause more drag on that lifter because it's got to release more pressure which I guess kind of makes sense. So your air filter gets clogged up, it's not pulling in enough air. And then the third one, and this one I do agree with, is as these lifters become out of adjustment, you're supposed to adjust these every, well, once a year at least, but it should be about every 100 hours. If these are out of adjustment, that means the lifters can't do what they're supposed to do, and there's all kinds of play in it. So if this is too loose and it can't have the push rod come in to lift it, you know, to do that little bump, there's no bump because it's just too much play. Then you're going to build up too much pressure, and so it will break that compression release. There's too much pressure against it. I'm going to put the spark plug back in so I don't forget to do all that. Now, I do think that most people should be able to adjust their valves. I've got several videos on it. If you have a feeler gauge, a torque wrench, a torque screwdriver, and a little box-in wrench, which you can do it with your fingers. You don't really need the box-in. And possibly a spark plug, then you can do this yourself. This is not a hard job. The manufacturer puts Permatex or a sealant around here. And you can find black Permatex at your auto parts store, so you can use that. Or you can order a gasket. And it's much easier to use a gasket. Now, if you're going to use a gasket, you got to clean all this Permatex off. So I just actually bought myself a brass brush for my drill, so I can clean all that off if I wanted to. But I've used Permatex a lot. Permatex is about $5 a tube on Amazon, and one tube does 2 valve covers. And now we'll put the valve cover back on. Again, I am not going to seal it up. There's no reason to waste the $5 or $2.50 or whatever it is, because I've already called the customer and I told her what the price was going to be to replace that camshaft. The aftermarket product, everybody on YouTube and in the reviews say you only get about 2 months use out of it before it breaks again. That you really need to go with the OEM, original manufacturer equipment camshaft, because they'll last longer. So the OEM camshaft was $70, but you need all the seals and the gaskets and all that, so that was another $30. So that the parts itself was $100. Plus, if you run into any issues while you're in there, unexpected issues, of course, you got oil costs because you're going to have to take the whole engine off, so you got to drain the oil. You got to set it on a bench. You got to take the bottom portion of the engine casing off. If the governor is broke, the inside the engine, you'll have to replace that. It might be a good time to replace it, actually. The oil slinger, there's a lot of things that could have broken in there because you have a piece of metal inside the engine now just floating around. Now, you can start this. It is possible. As a matter of fact, if the starter was working, I would show you, but all you gotta do is take spark plug out, put it at top dead center, put spark plug back in, put some starter fluid in the carburetor, it'll fire up. So you could be running it with that piece of metal in there. It could have broke the last time she started it. She went and mowed for 2 or 3 hours, shut it off, and couldn't start it again. So something else could be broken there, is my point. And since she said it wasn't running right, there might be, the governor could be broken in there. What I did was I Googled what is the average cost of a camshaft replacement. And I decided that's what I was going to charge, was that average cost. I thought it was a reasonable thing to do. Now the other thing is we also had to replace the starter. So there is an additional cost to that. But the big thing is this, once we get it running, is there anything with the carburetor? She's got gas in it, so it tells me that the carburetor's probably fouled up. It either needs cleaned or replaced. The ignition coil needs to be checked. There's no way to check the spark right now. So there's a lot of things that needs to be done after we get the camshaft in it. But I want to be clear, I'm not sure I said this in the video, the customer has declined doing the job. She actually had me research what it would cost to put a new engine in, and that's way expensive. A new engine on Amazon for this was $975 or something like that. And I will not go out the expense on parts for that. You know, if it's $200 or $300, I'll go out the expense. But when we're up to $900, if she decides not to pay, I can't sell this lawnmower for $900. It just wouldn't sell, so I would lose money on this. What I would do is have her buy the engine off Amazon or wherever she wanted, and then I would put it on. And she didn't like that idea either, so it's just too risky to go over the cost of the value of the mower itself when you're buying parts. Let's say I could sell this for $500. I can go out the cost of the camshaft, new carburetor, new starter, and all that kind of stuff, and still come out ahead if she decides not to pay and I have to sell the mower. So if you'll click this up next box, it'll take you to a video where I was working on something, so if I can inspire you to do your maintenance so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.